The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our webinar, Raising Financially Fit Kids. I'm Deb Cartiser from 12 Points Wealth Management, and I'm being joined today by Dan Sharkey. And 12 Points is a wealth management firm, and within the firm, my practice is focused on working with women and helping women gain mastery of their financial world. And Dan, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit about you and your practice?
Hey everyone, nice to be joined with you here today. As Deb mentioned, we are here to discuss financially fit kids, so we'll just go a little bit quick about my background to get that out of the way. There's my ugly mug. And you know what my background really is on the institutional side, and then helping adventurous families live their ideal life. And raising financially fit kids is certainly a tremendous part of that, to get your kids used to what it's like to handle money. So we'll talk more about that. And I have two kids of my own, as does Deb, so we're really excited to tackle this today.
So today we're going to be going over the financial literacy today and how sort of the lay of the land of the world, and building responsibility so kids can have greater independence. Living with consequences. I think this is a hard one as parents to not let your kids suffer and feel the pain of their consequences, but it's important. Understanding credit, what it means to owe money and how the whole system works. And then focusing a little bit on college tuition and debt, and what it means in the process. And investing, how the market works, and teaching your kid about that, and then giving back, how to be philanthropic, and legacy planning. So that's a little bit about estate planning and transferring wealth and those kinds of things. And I think this is so important because if you go to the next slide on financial capability study, this is about financial literacy and the studies they do to show us how literate people feel, and then they take quizzes and things like that. This is a study they do, I think, every 3 years. And what we're seeing is a decline in the rate of financial literacy, both what people understand and how they score themselves. And finances and money is a topic that makes people very worried and nervous and anxious. And I think with some mastery, it doesn't have to be that way. And so we're really committed at 12 Points to helping our clients and the people that we work with to really have this knowledge and this understanding so that life can just become easier and they can be more free. Particularly of interest in this is the teenagers in this study. So 18 to 34-year-olds show the highest level of financial stress. It's not entirely surprising, since that's a real wealth building and sort of the poverty years, if you will. And the next two statistics made me drop my jaw. I was shocked by that. Teens don't believe they're going to be financially independent from their parents by age 30. I don't know about all of you, but I don't want my kid living in my basement until they're 30. I think I will have to move away. 4 out of 10 teens fear they're not going to be able to afford to live on their own. So that's another scary thought. And so this curriculum is really devised on helping parents to educate their kids. And the next slide is a quote that I saw, and we're really talking about how having financial knowledge empowers people. And I just love the words here, because it's all about understanding that things can be possible with knowledge and skills and drive. And this is really sort of a testament to that. And I love the words, and I share it with my kids. I think it's really neat to know that with training and with understanding, you can make so much more possible in your life.
And Deb, let me just add something to that as well. It's about changing the conversation around money, and not necessarily lionizing it, but not creating a victim mentality around it either. Really understanding that money, while not the be all end all, does provide some important legs up in life, and allows you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. We'll touch more on this concept around in some of the later slides, but really addressing how money can impact your life, and being able to make smart decisions. What we're ultimately after, and I think what this quote perfectly summarizes, is the ability for you to truly make decisions intentionally around money, and that's ultimately what we're working towards.
So these are the 10 basic money skills that we're trying to get our, well, children, clients, adults, everybody to be able to feel comfortable with. And you guys can read through them. I don't need to read each one of them to you, but what I will provide you with at the end of this, we're going to send you out some resources that go with each one of them. So obviously learning to save is critical, and little children, the littlest, can learn to save, and learning to save early is so critical to having a successful retirement, to fulfilling dreams and things like that. But teaching our kids how you do that is so important. So look for, after the webinar, the resources section of this, and there are going to be some websites, some books, some activities, things like that, all centered around these different skills. But I think one of the most important things is talking about money, and making money part of your family conversation with your kids is so critical. So making sure that that is happening in your world. And the more that they hear it, the more you're talking about it, the more they're going to become comfortable with it, and it won't be a source of stress. Money is really a tool, and it doesn't have to carry the emotional and psychological baggage that we impart to it. So as you're going through this and thinking about your kids and how you're going to bring more information to them, remember that they're taking on your thoughts about money and your feelings about money, whether it's stress around paying bills or talking about not having enough or having to, whatever your conversation, they're picking up on all of it. And another important thing to think about is that there are sort of 7 money personalities. And we went over this in part 1 of the little kids section, but knowing who your child is and how they think about money can help you as you bring these lessons to them. So I'll just go over them quickly. It's the hoarder, the spendthrift, the scrimper who wants to save at all costs, the giver who gives away and they end up with nothing left. They're just giving. The beggar always has their hand out and wants more. The hustler is looking for a way to make a buck at whatever expense. It doesn't really matter. It's all about the transaction and getting that money coming their way. And then there's the oblivious. And as a financial person, one of my kids falls into that category right now. And it was sort of eye-opening to realize, oh, I have to help this and fix it. But so really money is about learning. It's a learning opportunity. So think of allowance or a part-time job or whatever it is. It's not so much about giving your kids money. It's about giving them a tool to learn with. So teaching them the spend, save, give percentages, setting them up in the beginning and saying, here's an allowance for you. They're probably beyond that as teenagers, but saying, all right, we're going to have a percentage of each week's or month's allowance, giving aside to the spend category, to the save and the give category, and letting them determine what happens with the give category, but working on the save category especially, and making sure that they're developing early habits. When they get Christmas money, the same percentage goes to save, whether it's birthday, holiday, whatever it is, making sure that it's going somewhere in the save bin, whether it's a piggy bank and starting with a bank account. They're now, at teenagers, they're big enough to understand how to budget, and learning budgeting habits is really important. So there are great tools like mint.com, FamZoo is another one, and we'll give you the resources for these at the end. But really understanding budgeting and learning where their money goes is critical to them, and sitting down with them and going through that is important. So now as teenagers, if they don't have it already, a checking account with a debit card attached to it is important, and letting them fail is also important. We'll get to that in a little bit, but show them, either start out with a card that has parental controls like green light if you need it with them. And another option is a bank account that's tied to your bank account. At 18, they can't have their own. So if you can see your activity on your app, you should be able to see a child account on your app as well. So making sure that you're seeing the activity that's going on there. And teaching them budgeting and forecasting is so critical. And as they get older, start switching the allowance to quarterly, so they really have to plan and budget and feel the pain of running out. Think about sharing aspects of your household budget with them, and then working with them on setting a budget for something like a trip, a weekend away, the prom, and even bringing them in on budgeting for a family vacation can be really helpful.
And beyond that as well, they're as teens especially get more independence, more ability to make decisions on their own, and as parents encouraging them to make decisions on their own, some good and some bad, as I'm sure most can attest. But there's a whole list of these topics that surround the concept of money and the ability for them to manage it as a crucial part of their daily life. So as Deb mentioned, depending upon how you structure an allowance with a child, as opposed to just giving them money, having them work for it, quote unquote. Is there a chore list that doesn't benefit them directly, such as cleaning their room, but mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, things that is not an expectation of them, but that goes above and beyond. Negotiating rates, understanding that there's some give and take to what they can be expected to do and how much they can actually earn by doing certain tasks around the house. The idea of a checking account with a debit card, there are a lot of programs that Deb has mentioned that we will share at the completion of the webinar, but that is a crucial component. I'm probably dating myself a little bit, and that's scary because I'm only not that old, but it already feels that way. When I was a kid, I had to go to the local Bergen County Savings and Loan with a passbook. It doesn't seem like that was that long ago, but literally having a digital printout of where my bank account stood and seeing those numbers grow and grow and grow was a huge driver for me to get part-time jobs, to work in the summer, to do those things, to be able to afford the little things like a new CD or whatever that had come out recently. But getting them involved early and starting that conversation is crucial. Start building credit. I know that sounds a bit far-fetched, and that's probably more directed to those who will be utilizing it as they get older, if they're on their way to college, but that's a crucial component. Having them understand that a credit card is not simply a piece of plastic. A quick little funny story is a former colleague of mine, his son, who was about a junior in high school, said, "Dad, why don't you just put it on your credit card?" Without making the conscious connection that was actually the same as spending actual dollars. So never take anything for granted that what your kids know. I think that's a crucial point here, is that all these ideas and all these suggestions are ways to incorporate them into the financial decision-making process, but really ways to educate them about the true ways of the world. Comparison shopping. Why does one store charge one thing versus the other? By not taking perhaps the easiest route. There are other stores besides Amazon, though my local delivery men may dispute that. But shopping for rates, shopping for fees, talking about other costs that are associated with the purchase of items is tremendously important. Deb has really talked deeply about expanding the conversation about money and not keeping it as a black box. Do we want to go skiing in Vermont or do we want to go skiing in Colorado? There are certain trade-offs that they should be aware of that goes into that. And having them involved in those decisions. If you're going to buy a car, taking them with you. There's a great tip that my father taught me, and it was more centered around how to change a tire and do those types of things. But each summer we would have one activity that was new. And we would strongly encourage you to do the same about money. You don't learn how to do a tax return in school. You don't learn how to balance a checkbook. You don't learn about late fees and missed payments. Those are not things that are taught in elementary school or high school. So having those conversations so they are aware of the consequences of their actions is critically important. One key point here that is really worth mentioning is if you do empower them with an allowance and with a part-time job, to try to hold off on judgment about what they spend their money on. Allowing them to feel the consequences of their decisions. If they want to buy their 10th pair of Jordans and you think that's crazy, well, it's not your money, it's theirs. And they're going to feel the consequence of those actions, as long as you yourself have discipline to confirm with them, hey, that's what you decide to spend your money on. That's how the situation goes. So we really want them to be able to learn how to do this on their own, to really begin to make more sound decisions as they go through time. If every time that they make a choice, they get bailed out by mom or dad, that lesson is not going to stick as well as it could.
So this is one, as I said, I have trouble with living with the consequences, and it's not for just the older kids, it's for the little kids as well. And this is letting them learn what the consequences is about. The consequences is so important, because failing now has so much less impact, and they're supposed to fail now. They're supposed to have problems where they run out of money, where they blew their lunch money on something dumb, if you're giving them the lunch money for the month up front or something like that. And let them fail without judgment. It's so important to just help them with it, or point out the lesson without saying, oh, you shouldn't have spent your money on that, because then they're going to start hiding it from you. So they're learning, as they've been all along, to control want versus need, and they have to do that throughout their entire life. So if you keep jumping in to say, oh, I'll buy you that sweater that you want, or that pair of sneakers that you want, they're not going to feel the strain of that. And they need to, because real life comes with that. And if you raise your kids to have their hands out, they're always going to have their hand out. It doesn't stop when they leave the house. It continues. They're their 20s and 30s, and we see this with clients who may have a particular kid who's always got a handout. So keep that in the back of your head as you're dealing with them, but give them the freedom so that they can make their own decision in this. That's really, really important. And teach them the management that needs to go on between opportunities. Oh, my friend called, he wants me to go skiing for the weekend, or we're all going to the movies even though I haven't really budgeted for that, and I'm really saving for something over here that's really important to me. So teaching them the trade-off of that, and ask questions. Let them get to determine what's the most important thing rather than telling them. Ask them how it's going to affect the budget that they send out, or how it's going to affect their weekend if they don't save enough money to go on this thing that they've planned to do. So there's teaching moments in all of it, but the more you can ask questions, the better. Kids get into trouble with debt and credit cards. I think the biggest mistake we can make as parents is to give somebody a piece of plastic and to say, here, use this for emergencies. It's too hard, it's too tempting. I think we all have stories of our college friends who got into terrible trouble with credit cards. If they run up a balance that they can't pay back, and you want to bail them out of that, that's completely understandable because it makes financial sense. But put them on a payment plan where they're paying you back. If they borrow against their allowance, make them pay you back. So having that discipline, because the real world doesn't operate along the lines of, oh, that's okay, we'll forgive this one. So talking about your own successes and failures is also really important. Letting them know that you've been where they are and you've screwed things up somewhere along the way is really helpful, and teach them stories where you've gotten out of it too. All those things can be helpful to them.
And along those lines too, let me just add one other point on that. The best piece of advice my father ever gave me was when I was making those decisions. He said the cavalry wasn't coming, and by the look in his eyes, I knew that he was right. So to Deb's point, by allowing them to fail on their own is really critical. The other thing that is worth mentioning, allowing them to fail on their own doesn't necessarily mean not keeping a watchful eye. In the same vein that you don't just throw your kid the car keys and say good luck, these things need to be monitored, but still allowing them the freedom to make their own decisions and not necessarily changing the course of their behavior before they're allowed to make those mistakes. You learn far more by making mistakes than you do by your successes. So I think that's a tremendous point that Deb just made. Understanding credit is another key component, and this is something that across the board, whether it's even adults, most people struggle with. What is your credit score? How does it work? What are the factors that go into it? How do you maintain a good credit score? Those are all critical things. And in today's environment, I would encourage all of you to understand just how important having good credit is. It's a crucial data point in 2021, and as we go forward, and establishing these habits early is vital to setting your kids up on a financially successful road. The other thing I would also very much encourage you to talk about is highlighting to them that credit in and of itself is a good thing. The ability to access credit when needed is a positive. the behaviors that people utilize while using credit is really what gets most people in trouble. The idea that utilizing debt is not beneficial for people who utilize it responsibly is incorrect. It is not the vehicle itself. The credit card itself is not to blame. It's the user who's swiping the plastic. So that's a crucial lesson, but it retrains the mind to think about, this is ultimately my decisions that are causing these consequences, not the evil credit card company. Now, no one is going to defend a credit card company, but it's important to realize that the user is ultimately responsible. Always teaching them how to repay in full. Repaying in full before their due date is a nice little trick to always carry a very small balance. Understanding that anything you buy today is just a debt in the future that you will be responsible for. Deb made a great point just a second ago about, we don't want to sink your kids' credit for the sake of making a point, but they could still pay the bank of mom and dad back, and they should be responsible for every dollar, every cent of interest, and every late fee that is associated with you having to do that if that situation arises. They should also understand that when they borrow $100 and then they don't pay it back on time, they no longer owe $100. Understanding compound interest. These are things that are critical to understanding how the real world works. Not all debt is the same. A mortgage and student loans versus a credit card versus a store card, charge card, those are all treated and viewed differently. There is as part of your credit score, there is a judgment being made as to whether or not you are making sound financial decisions, and the type of credit that you use is a component of that. So understanding those and ensuring that they understand them as well. Again, making decisions intentionally as opposed to just signing up for something because it is convenient. Those little distinctions really foster solid foundations as you move forward. 10,000, the concept of compound interest, showing them what it actually takes to get rid of a large balance as opposed to the amount you actually borrowed. They want a pair of sneakers today, like I said, that costs $100, and they don't have that money. Those sneakers no longer cost that exact amount. To teach them how to shop around, understanding the definitions. What are you actually signing up for? What's a fixed rate versus a variable rate? What's an introductory rate versus an actual rate? Those are all critical pieces. And then getting a good credit card that protects them, but also establishes a credit history. Credit history is one of the, and I touched on this earlier, one of the most important things you can do from a younger age once you are eligible to really ensure that your credit stays high and you have a successful history that goes back over a number of years.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things just on that one is NerdWallet has a great place to go find and compare different rates on different cards. And the other thing is, back to the FICO scores for a second, employers are now, or now as though it's happened yesterday, have been for a while asking for credit reports on people. So it's another way of seeing how you function in the world. And to know that more than just you are looking at that credit report. So I think that's really important too. Investing for the future, obviously this is a component of what we do at 12 Points, but teach them how the stock market works. And there's a fun game you can play at stockmarketgame.org. This past summer with my daughter, I worked with 5 12-year-olds, and we talked about the market, how it works. And they each picked different stocks that they wanted to phantom invest with. So throughout the summer, we pretended that we had bought $1,000 worth of each of the securities, and they all had interesting reasons for picking it. And they were all great reasons. From, I want to buy something like Walmart or, a big box store because everybody's buying toilet paper right now, things like that. They had all kinds of great ideas. Their creativity was amazing. But then we followed it all summer to see what our investments did. And they were really excited about it. So don't think that your kids are just naturally disinterested. It can be really fun. And, have them do the same. Pick a couple of securities and stocks and companies that they want to follow for various reasons, and then track it, see how it goes. Show them how to read a balance sheet. What are credits? What are debits? And if you don't know, go look it up. But they should have some real basic information of how to look at those things and compare different numbers and explain what they mean. And then talk about how you invest as a family, how you're saving for the future, what kinds of things you have. Maybe you have college money set aside for your kids. Maybe you have family trust funds. Let them know what those things are and how, you know, your grandfather invested this money way back when, and it's now helping provide income for the family. Or, you know, you've got a 529 set aside for them for college, and it's going to help them pay for college. And, you know, as teenagers and things like that, they can start to buy a stock or two. I'd be careful on how this works, because right now the market is flooded with retail investors. So there's a little bit of danger here I want to caution you about. But buying a couple of stocks and holding them long term can be another great way to sort of get their foot. And bring them into a meeting with your investment advisor and have them sit down and listen to what goes on and start to think about, well, how are they going to prepare and what do they believe in and those kinds of things. And there's plenty of articles, there's lots of information out there, and we obviously are a resource if you have questions or want to ask about that.
And the idea of having them sit on with your investment advisor, I can only speak from our firm, but we would be thrilled if someone would bring in their kids. Don't fear the idea that they're going to get in the way. If that's even a thought, then you're working with the wrong person. But allowing them to just hear the words, even if they don't even know what they mean, is critical, especially if you have a teenager who's about to go off to college. You know, just the idea that someone who's 17 or 18 has to pick a career path, which they know nothing about for the rest of their life, seems a little comical at the time. But if you've introduced them to finance, you've introduced them to the idea of investing or financial planning, they may spark up an interest that they didn't know that they had. So I would encourage everyone, if you take anything from this slide individually, the ability to take them to meet your advisor, I think is a terrific one that most people don't take advantage of.
Yeah, and you don't have to lay out all the financial information in front of your kids either. You can control what they see and what the advisor talks about. So if there are areas that you want to keep from them, that's fine. You can do that too. But that information and exposure can go a long way with that.
Yeah. Money shouldn't be a black box, and as quickly as you can expose them to how this actually all works and comes together, the better off they will be. So college tuition and debt is obviously front and center for most parents as their kids age through high school. We are actually doing a webinar on this exact topic Tuesday, May 25th. So everyone who's here now will also get a reminder of that. That's a great information session for anyone who has kids or will have kids who are going to go to college and what you need to think about. But we'll touch on a little bit of it here. College tuition has skyrocketed, and it runs the gamut from very affordable quality state schools to exorbitantly priced private institutions. Money has to have a seat at the table if there's any debate as to who's paying for it, how it's going to be financed. If you can afford your college tuition regardless of school, that's terrific. Then you can ignore what I'm saying. But if not, you fall into the category of 99% of the US population, then it has to be a factor when you are thinking about how your kid is going to actually go through the college process. Understanding early what you can contribute, what your son or daughter is expected to contribute. If you have younger kids, when should you start saving? The answer was probably yesterday, just like everyone. But having a plan as to how you can address that beforehand is important. This needs to be a consideration before you start looking for school, and having that conversation with your child to know what this is likely to look like is crucial to properly set their expectations. There are so many good schools out there now at affordable prices that I would encourage all of you to look beyond the big names that you see in the news. To give you a quick example, and one that I always use on our college webinar that I just mentioned, would be a school like Boston College, which is tremendously popular. Boston College is an excellent academic institution, but it is not the only one of such an ilk. There are similar schools. The example that I would always use is a school like Bucknell, which has excellent academics, but is simply not as popular. Therefore, their aid packages and other grants and scholarships are significantly higher. So you have to consider all facets of the education process before you actually go on this journey. You have to consider yourself. The cliche analogy is when you're on the airplane, they tell you to always put your mask over your face first. You can borrow money for school. You can pay that off over time. You can come up with a plan to share that burden with your child after they've graduated. You cannot do the same for your retirement or for the other financial goals that you have as a family. So both of those considerations need to be mindful of as you are making these decisions. Just to touch briefly on what I mentioned earlier about compound interest. Whatever your child borrows for tuition is not what they will pay back. A simple exercise to have them appreciate the totality of what they're doing is, I have all of my clients who come to me with this question do the following. How much are they going to borrow? What's the interest rate? And then what are they going to do when they're actually out of school? I want them to calculate what their starting salary is likely to be. I want them to calculate, are they going to live at home or are they going to rent? I want them to calculate what their monthly payment is likely to look like, because I promise you that when you amortize the cost of, let's say, Boston University or Northeastern, we're right outside of Boston, over the course of 20 years at $75,000 a year and an interest rate that's hovering somewhere around the 5 or 6% mark, sometimes higher, they are going to be astonished at the total amount of money that they ultimately end up paying back. And I promise you that if they appreciate what they will owe now, then the resentment and other feelings of betrayal, not to be dramatic, will be lessened as they get older. Whether or not you fully communicate with your kids what school is likely to cost, they will find out, because it's going to be their burden once they are done, most likely. So please bring them in part of the conversation, and they need to fully understand the consequences of their decision, because they will be living with those consequences for a long, long period of time. If you get scholarships, merit money, always go back and ask for more. You'd be surprised how often, if you push, you're able to squeeze out a couple of more dollars. Also consider all of the other alternatives, and this is a topic we'll get into far more detail on in a couple of weeks, but passion scholarships. If you like golf, if you like karate, if you like chess, I promise you there is an organization out there that can help. Put the onus on your kid to do that work, because they're going to feel accomplished when they actually find something, and it's going to further emphasize to them the importance of the financial decisions they're making for their own future.
Yeah, my son was a freshman in college this year, and we're thinking about this now. I probably would have done things a little bit differently, but we did ask for more money and we got more money. And I would also say, broaden your horizons, like Dan was saying earlier, broaden your horizons beyond just the New England area. We don't have to go far to access great schools, but schools that are farther away offer a lot more merit money, because the kid from Massachusetts is much more attractive than the one from the regional area with the same grades. So definitely expand. If your child's comfortable and you are, expand your search a little farther. It can mean more money in your pocket.
Okay. And then, so estate planning, which is, I know a topic that most people would rather go to the dentist than talk about, but it is a crucial component, especially if it impacts generations beyond you as parents. So continuing with that theme of meeting with your estate planning attorney, if you have one, and bringing your child along. Again, you don't necessarily need to get into how every penny is likely to be dispersed upon your death. We don't want that type of inspirational meeting to bog down the lessons that you are trying to teach them. But it is important to communicate what they can expect, and how the hard work that has been done by you or previous generations will impact them, over the long haul. The most successful families that we see who have this intergenerational wealth that they're likely to pass through is teaching them the privilege of having this type of money and the responsibility that comes along with it. Those concepts are very difficult to understand if they don't truly appreciate why things have happened, how they are set up, what the goal of this money is. What we also would say that is really, really critical is being very clear. If you are fortunate enough to be in a position in which your kids will be beneficiaries of even a small amount of money, as to what your desires for that pool of money is. This is why it was saved. This is why it's being handed down. This is what we hope you will do with it. Those conversations are very important. And if you can have them, if you have kids who are at a place that they can absorb that information, you can do it at a very, very young age and really allow them the ability to grow with those dollars and understand the impact it's going to have on their life. Again, this is really more of a personal decision about when. There's no right age about when, but when they are going off to college, you're beginning to understand, to see how they make decisions with money, and you can more openly decide, how much you want to reveal. If there are, our family trusts, how did those trusts get established? That family history is critically important to understanding that there was those before them who potentially made sacrifices for their benefit, and that's something that they should be aware of. Also, too, and this is critically important for any kids who are going away to school. Once they turn 18, they are adults. You should absolutely have a power of attorney signed and a HIPAA release, which is a way of accessing their medical records before they leave the house. We have all of our clients who are having college-bound children sign those, because if they're in a car accident, if they have too much fun one night and they end up in the hospital, you're not going to be able to get any information technically. Now, whether or not that's real or not, that remains to be seen. But having this release is a critical thing to being able to ease your mind as a parent in the event that something happens to your child.
Yeah, and the healthcare proxy, giving you the ability to make decisions if they can't, is another critical one. The other thing, we have two exercises on there that are being a good citizen of the world, and how to use money to change the world. So the give percentage, having that with little kids, it's a piggy bank or a bucket of some kind that they're putting some give money into. Having your kids identify what causes or things they believe in, or just looking out along the landscape of the world these days and identifying things that sort of keep you awake at night, or make you feel worried or concerned for other people. Let them determine what some of those causes are, and then give a little bit towards them. Volunteering as a family is a nice way to go. Maybe your teens are at the point now where they want nothing to do with being with mom and dad, and that won't work anymore, but it's an easy way to sort of get the family together and do some things that are meaningful. The other thing is, colleges and resumes and things like that, as they go out to get their first job, show some leadership here. It's an easy way to do it. Charities are always looking for somebody who's leading a drive, who's taking over a component of work that needs to be done for the charity. It's really an easy way for kids to have a leadership position and to have a little flex on their resumes. So think about those opportunities there. And having a local donation brought to a local charity can also be really meaningful. They're seeing more cause and effects there. And letting holiday rituals be part of giving to different causes, and I don't necessarily mean financially. I can mean, whether it's a Meals on Wheels delivery or volunteering at Thanksgiving time at a homeless shelter or something like that. It can really be a meaningful activity that can help the kids to see where they're making a difference and how to make differences. And there are things called, volunteer vacations, where they can go off and have a couple of weeks rather, of service to an organization. And there are websites devoted to that and finding opportunities to that. So there's neat ways that you can get together with your kids and let them have an experience that's devised around some kind of charitable bent. And, treat your kids like they're a mini grant making board. Tell them that you're going to give them X amount of money and they can determine where it goes, and then talk about the criteria of why they chose what they chose. Make them work together if you have more than one child and they have maybe different views, and just that activity can be interesting to watch. I think you'll see a lot come out with personalities there. And I think with all this, some of the takeaways that we have is really about being you're the primary educator for your kids on this topic. As we said before, there's really nothing systemically that allows our kids to be educated on these topics. So look for opportunity everywhere to be able to talk to them about these kinds of things. Remember their money personality that we went over quickly in the beginning. Figure out which one your kid is most like, and then how you can help them with that as a sort of guidepost to either overcome some of their tendencies or to formulate new ideas. And being the positive role model, knowing that they're picking up on your vibe around money, knowing that you're setting examples for them, keep that in mind as you go through your day and bill paying and things like that. And remember to praise hard work and initiative, not the money that they earned. And really show them that, I'm so proud of your entrepreneurial spirit, or what you devised from the lemonade stand to the Coke drive that you came up with. It's really about the work and the initiative and their participation, not what they earned for it. And anytime you can encourage your kids to dive deeper into learning about finance is helpful. I saw something in an article that was about, challenging your kids to come up with a financial term that you don't know about. And, maybe they get some money for it or something fun, but letting them come up with financial terms that maybe you haven't heard of or you can't describe the right way, I think is a fun way to kind of do it when it's, finance vocabulary. Again, reserving judgment on their spending is really critical. Because it shows them, if you can stay out of the judgment zone, it'll show them that you believe in them and that you have faith in them and you're confident in their abilities. So that can go a long way towards their own self-esteem in this arena. And again, including them in all the ways you can in your own financial world, whether it's teaching them what you're putting aside for college, showing them how it works when you go buy a car. I caution you though, don't bring your kids in to discussions if you don't want to give them a vote. If they don't have a say, don't involve them in the deciding factor. But you can let them know how it's going behind the scenes and what kinds of things you and your partner are thinking about and talking about in terms of evaluating different decisions. So that's what we had for you today. Dan and I are available if you have questions, if you have anything that you want to talk about. Dan, I'm not sure if there are questions that have come up.
So one question that had come up is what is the best way to kind of teach your kids about how to when they make money from a summer job, how to actually deal with the money that they're receiving, cash on hand, and what that spending can go to. And I'll just take that just quickly. A quick side story about me: I was a caddy when I was growing up. Which, for anyone out there who likes golf, it's the best way for a kid to spend the summer. But what's interesting about that is you have all this little physical cash on hand, and what I was taught at a very young age was the ability to actually know to go to the bank. Something as simple as knowing to go make a deposit. Nowadays, if things are done electronically, perhaps that's a little, kind of a relic of the past. But when you think about teaching your kids about money, even don't take anything for granted. Taking them to show them how to go to the bank, how to make a deposit, how to talk to the cashier to make sure that you're doing things correctly. Don't overlook the importance of teaching them how to do that. Teaching them how to use an ATM, if that's going to be their preferred method of actually taking some of that hard work and money out, and not necessarily relying on you. Those little things are critically important. So, and that's the only.
Yeah, another question that I get a lot is. Yeah, another question that I get a lot from clients is how to deal with my kids who have very different money personalities. If you've got somebody who's the oblivious one, and you have somebody who's a giver, and all they do is give away all their money. They buy their friends drinks at Starbucks. They're paying for everybody's gas. They're taking people out to dinner, and then partway through the month they have nothing. They're no money left. And then you have somebody who's the beggar, who's always got a handout. They've always got a reason why they need money. And how do you deal with these kids differently? And, I think it's about putting boundaries in place for each one of them that are a little bit different, and teaching them sort of their own foibles and pointing out to them what's going on and why it's going on. Your kindness is so obvious, who's the giver, and this is so great that you do this, but can we find other ways that you can care for your friends aside from providing money for all your activities? And for the person who's the beggar, it's saying no. And so, you can refrain from saying no for the other kids because they're much more responsible with the money, but the person who's the beggar, you've really got to nip those kinds of things in the bud. So it becomes your awareness that's going to be so critical in dealing with the kids differently, and teaching them about their sort of innate responses to money, and just bringing them on board and having an understanding. But don't be afraid to have different rules for different kids. And the other thing I would also say is any kind of app or tool that you use for finances, show your kids when you're using it what you're doing and why. I mean, whether it's you're looking at your app on a phone to see if the check to the contractor has cleared. Great, show your child why you're doing that and explain, well, I want to make sure that that's cleared because I want to make sure that this balance is an accurate balance and things like that. Maybe it's going over their bank balance with them once a month and showing them to look at these things. If you're using other apps like payment apps and things like that, making sure they're checking the activity. So when you're doing it, talk to them about it and show them what you're using and why. And in our resource section, we'll have a lot more apps and websites and activity that I think can help all of you. So if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to email Dan or me, and we look forward to hearing you and seeing you attend hopefully the college webinar, and check our website for more upcoming webinars that'll help you with your family on finances. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.